This is Brad A. Milford with the Unlimited Business Wisdom Podcast, where leaders, seasoned entrepreneurs, and business owners share their wisdom. It's straight to the point to respect people's time, and because we know knowledge and wisdom turn to business possibility, and possibility mixed with support and action become reality. In this podcast, we discuss leadership, sales, marketing, operations, team development, quality, and finance to drive sustainable results and everlasting impact to make the world a better place. Thanks for joining us.
Ed, thanks for joining us on the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. In a few
You say that right
sentences-
now. We haven't finished it yet. So.
It's true. It's true. In a few sentences, would you tell the audience who you are and what you do?
In a few sentences, that's I don't know if I can do that, but I'll do my best. Basically, I'm in the mortgage industry. I've been and I'm in California. I've been doing that for 25 years. I run a local radio show that talks about real estate and finance because I wanted to help people get re-educated why they should own a home. You know, personal wealth, that you build that through owning a home for most people. And the other thing is I also run two different podcasts. One's called Inner Edison, and the other one's called Helping the Brave, which is helping veterans once they take the uniform off. And that's pretty much what I do now. But if you want to know way more than that, just listen to my podcast, because I've said so much more than that. So you know how it is. Everybody knows everything personally about you once you get on radio and do all the other stuff. So
at least they think they do, right?
Well, I've said so much. Because I talked about my childhood, where my dad, I lost my dad at age 12, hairy cell leukemia from Vietnam, and just the stuff that, we went from being on the good side of the tracks to the other side of the tracks. I had a couple pair of pants and 3 shirts and a few socks. I was, some would say we were poor, but from what I understand, white people can't be poor. So I'm just kidding.
Okay. Right.
Well, everybody thinks
Right.
that's it. We're out of here. No, what I mean is everybody can be from any, and run through these same issues. It's you never know who somebody is. It's that old statement. Don't judge a book by its cover, right? Because you have no idea how that person got there. I went through so much stuff, during the 2006-7 downturn and how it destroyed our industry that I was in. It really affected me. And I've talked about all this on my different podcasts, but people think that it's success overnight. It's not. It takes forever and over and over, and you're fighting for it. I've had some people on my podcast that like the UGG founder, Brian Smith, and they were like, 15 years it took him to build that company. He lost it once during that period of time. So it's important to know that just because someone's successful, they might not really be successful too, right? If you're driving the fancy car and all that kind of stuff, that they might be just over broke, and if they don't get their next paycheck, they can't make those payments. So don't judge somebody just by who they are.
Right on. There's a lot of that out there too. A lot of the things that you just said. You just dropped a whole lot of stuff that's truth.
Well, I'm on radio, so I tell the truth now. That's one thing about talk radio is you have to just say the way it is and how you feel, and you bring the right people to you, right? And it's important I want the right people to come to me. I don't want somebody who thinks I'm a certain way because I'm fake. I'm not. I wear a black t-shirt on everything because I learned that as much as we do video wise, if you wear the same color shirt all the time, nobody knows when you did the video. So
okay. Well, there's a little nugget there. It's interesting you talked about Brian. I use that story a lot. In fact, you highlighted that. I know there's a story that when they first started out, that is a red ocean market, very highly competitive kind of, to get into the shoe market. That's some tough stuff, right? Forget coaching or speaking or all that. Like, if you want to get into the shoe market, you better have your ducks in a row. And so as the story goes, the way I understand it, they had to really scale back and niche into the surfers is what they knew, I think. That's how the story goes.
Well, so if you lived during the period of time, because I did, I remember during the 80s down in San Diego, and seeing all the stuff that's going through. And remember, and in the 90s, seeing the UGG boots in the Costco. And so everything of his story I've lived through. The one thing about the UGG is because he brought it to the surfer shops first, because he was a huge surfer. I mean, that's where he brought it. And everybody's like, yeah, we'd love to have them. And then he couldn't sell them forever. So then he started selling them out of the back of his car and built it that way, so.
It's an interesting story because a lot of people get into business and then they have trouble with their language and they're trying to speak a language that they don't speak. So you got to speak the language. You got to know the client, all that stuff about ideal client. It's really an interesting story. So, but we're not here to talk about their story.
I know, but it's important. You're talking about stories and what I do and stuff like that. And I highlight other people's stories too, because it's important. What I learned in business, I've learned a lot more from my podcast, so.
Right on. Totally relate. Also relate to being growing up on the wrong side of the track. So I don't know what you're hearing, but when you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, I get that. Totally.
Yeah.
So totally resonate.
I mean, we also are vets, Navy. So, I mean, there's a lot there. And I think a lot of us, join the Navy, the military to get out of our situation, to better ourselves. And that's, if you used it for the right reason, then you bettered yourself, right? You get out better than when you went in. And that's what's really important.
Yeah, that's a can of worms. Maybe we'll talk about it on your podcast.
Oh, you're talking about helping the brave. Yeah, we'll talk about that. But I'm just saying, for most people, especially today, if you're going in the military, you need to have a plan. And if it's not the plan to stay there for 20 years, you need to have that. If that's your plan, that's fine. But also have a plan B in case that doesn't happen, you get injured or something else happens. And we can talk about that later. But what do you want to talk about?
But totally. I want to know what you think is the best thing about being a businessman.
Being able to control your own destiny.
Talk to me about that, Ed.
What I mean by that is if you work for somebody, a lot of people think working for somebody, you have job security. And that's the one thing you do not have working for somebody else. They could come in at any moment and say, hey, we don't need you anymore. We just hired all these people out of the Philippines or over somewhere else, and they're going to handle that job now. We saw that a lot in the mortgage industry, where a lot of the processing stuff was done in India and other places. We don't do that, but a lot of companies did that with large groups just because they wanted to do volume. But for me, I don't want my personal information over in a different country. So I guess but what I'm getting at is you can control your life by owning a business and growing it. And it doesn't have to be a business having 100 employees. It could be a business of one, where you do certain things that you make enough money that you're successful. And what I mean by that is your definition of successful is different than somebody else's, and don't go off of how somebody else is. Figure out what you want in life. If that means you make enough money where you can be home all the time for your kids, that's what you want, then do that.
Right on. That's good advice. A lot of people just dive in for the money reasons, and they don't have their
there's a lot
clear plan path.
Well, the problem with that is, like, I'm in California. There's so much regulation now, and they keep adding more on more. And that's why a lot of businesses are moving out of California because of that regulation. And, with so my industry, just our rates, in the last 30 to 45 days went up almost 1.75% because of the inflation factor that's out there. Well, that was created by the current administration when they came in, and certain things. I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of it was, and their look on things. So there's other things that are out there that you have no control over as you own a business. So maybe you look at an industry where there's less government regulation and certain things, or start one in a state that doesn't have as much.
Right.
I don't know if that's an answer.
Of course it's an answer. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. There's just answers. I really like that you shared that. A lot of people jump into business, and I'm sure you know this. They jump into business, and then they don't know that they got to have insurance, and there's all these regulations, and if you,
I didn't know.
It's one thing to have a little side gig, right? That you're just collecting more on your social security, social security number and whatnot. But to start an actual business is a whole different ballgame.
Right, but there's so many more people these days who are starting it but they're not hiring employees. They're doing, it's so easy to sell stuff these days. If you want to sell certain things on the social media, reels and different things you can do. I was watching a thing over the weekend. I was watching this guy. He goes, watch this. Boop, 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 boop. And he had his thing out there in like seconds, where I'm old school. We did, postcards back in the 90s when we were selling mortgages. Right. And I still think today social media is postcards. It's just a different angle.
Love that perspective. It's so true.
Right. Because you're going direct to consumer, and you're having them look at it. And it's the same way. They look the same as if they're done right, the same way. So.
Yeah, I'm going to refrain from going down the social media path because you'll get me on a rant, Ed.
Good or bad?
Having social media does not mean you own a business.
No, what I mean by that is it's another form of marketing aspect. I remember when they all came out and they said, internet's changing everything, right? And it's like, no, it's one more form of getting to your clients, right? I remember the phone book was this one thing. Then we did postcards. You do there's so many different places for advertising now and putting information out. It's just social media is the least expensive avenue to a certain point.
So for you, social media is just one more avenue that people can just ask you the same question you get asked all the time. Do I need 20% to put down on a house?
No, you do not need that. You need, right. If you're a vet, you need 0. You can do USDA with 0, and you can do 3% conventional and 3.5% FHA. So you don't need 20% down. There, answer that question.
And I asked that question for 2 reasons. 1, just for humor, and 2, because I know it's a frequently asked questions for you. You probably get messages all the time. Do I need to have 20% down? And 2, because you answer that question right on your website. So
it's a number one question that is asked on Google most of the time, because people still think that you need 20% down when you don't. And a lot of the other question is it a good time to buy? And the answer is yes, because the house market today, and the interest rates today. You have no idea where those 2 things are going to be tomorrow.
If you can find a house.
Correct. But the one thing that interest rates going up, what we just seen, it's taken 9 million people out nationwide. So instead of getting 24 offers on a house, you're down to probably 14 to 10. And in certain price points, there's 1 to 4 offers, and there's still 30% of all the offers are still cash. So you're right about that. Yeah. I mean, don't get me, we could be on that part forever. Cause the biggest thing is the next one is, are we in a bubble? Right. That's another top one. Are we in a bubble? No, we have, I won't get into the whole thing cause it'll take a lot longer than probably your podcast. But the biggest thing is we have, since 2007 to today, we have 14 million more households and 3 million less houses. So there's your math problem.
Got it.
Yeah.
Bubble or no bubble. You do the math and figure it out.
Basically what we're saying, we need to build 2 million homes a year for the next decade to get caught up. And that's not going to happen with the supply chain issue and the fact of how long it takes to build houses in certain states and certain places. So.
Interesting you say that, because having a construction background myself, and I often use this, we all come from our experiences, right? I noticed that trend over and over and over again. I mean, it's like the economy raises and then it falls, and then it raises and it falls. I mean, it's always been a cycle, much longer than I've been alive. But the construction rates, I noticed they're always a big deal when it comes to how strong the economy is. So, and I mean, to sustain the population, that's a whole nother story. One we definitely don't want to get into on this podcast.
Well, I mean, because a lot of people are looking back at 2006, right, and saying we have to be in a bubble because they went up and we lost and we dropped at that point. We're in total 2 different worlds now. Back then, the problem was we overbuilt homes for the amount of people who were coming. Just give me 2 minutes. All right, so I answer this question and then everybody will know. So if you go back from 2002. Because the average age for somebody to own a home is 31 years. That's when they start their family, start everything on average. People do it earlier, some later, but on average. If you go back 31 years, you're talking about 1973-ish, and that was Roe versus Wade, where the abortion bill came in. Birth rates plummeted for the next 10 years, the next decade. So you fast forward 31 years. We're building the most homes we've ever built in years. 1.5 million in 2005, 1.6 million in 2006. And we're building them for people to coming of age that aren't coming of age. And everybody goes, well, how were they building? Why were they thinking that? Well, we had these loan programs that allowed people to buy 2 and 3 houses without any, if you had a pulse, you could do it. And that was the problem. We overbuilt because we had these programs that allowed people to buy them. And then the market fell apart because of those programs, because they were rated them wrong. Look at The Big Short. Watch that movie. You'll understand what I'm talking about. The rating agency rated them as triple A's and they should have been D's. And if they would have done that, nobody would have bought them because the rate would have been too high. So you fast forward now, after 2007, it took like 6 to 7 years to absorb all those homes. And then we didn't build anything from 2010 to 2019. We built the same amount of homes as we did from 1930 to 1939, which was 7.5 million, which is the least amount ever. So we didn't build enough now after that point. And so now we're short. Fannie Mae says 4.3 million. And I'm sorry. Yeah. Is that what I said? 200. What did I say? We need to build 2 million a year. So we're down, 4.3 million. And then Freddie Mac says about 4 million. So there's a lot of houses we're short right now.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying bubble, not coming. We have too many other problems.
Yeah. We're definitely experiencing that where I live here in Florida. It's hard to find
every state. It's every state. I don't care where it is. It's every state.
I love it. You're full of facts and details.
Yeah. And the problem is I'm trying to get on podcasts and talk about other things, right? Because, Steve's like, you should be talking about this and all this stuff about like pain points, in your business, because I spent my last. Well, I'm doing go ahead, whatever you want to do. I'm open.
No, we're going to shift gears. We're going to shift gears. So this is great. I love this. This is definitely facts and information that I'm unfamiliar with. So I love that you're sharing some of those details, and I'm sure the listeners will love that too.
Well, people want to know.
Now they know how to they know who to reach out to when they have questions. So we'll get to that.
And if I can't help you, I will get you to the right people to help you, because it's about connecting people just like you want to do.
Right on.
And it's important because people are, not wanting to buy because of all this stuff they hear out there, right? We're the worst numbers in 3 years for new home sales or for the numbers. Well, if inventory keeps going down each year and you're selling that inventory, guess what? Percentages are going to go down each year because you only have so much inventory to sell each year. It's going to keep going down. Mark Twain said there's lies, damn lies, and then statistics. And that's basically what the media uses. You can figure it out.
Repeat that one more time.
Which part? Mark Twain?
Just the last piece. What you said, Mark Twain said what?
Mark Twain said there's lies, damn lies, and then statistics.
Love it. So true. So we are going to shift gears. I appreciate all those facts and details, Ed. We're going to shift gears here. Here's what we experience on this podcast. We hear from business owners all the time. They're getting so much business, Ed, that sometimes the amounts of business that they're getting causes some chaos or overwhelm in their business. Would you be willing to share your thoughts on that subject?
Sure. And I'm going to go back to a podcast I just did. All right. I was talking to a guy and he says, you should put your team together before you figure out your product, before you do anything else. And I think a lot of business owners start backwards, right? I need to get the business and then I'll get the people. And we just saw that when we went through the Great Recession. I'm sorry, not Great Recession, the pandemic. Sorry, I'm so used to these talking too much about other stuff, where the lending industry, we did more loans in that first year than we did in 10 years. So now we had to ramp up and get all these people to help this volume. And that was a nightmare for all of us. And then you get all these people and now you're hearing them laying off 3,000 people here, 2,000 people here. Detroit, I'm not saying the companies, but it's so the biggest thing I can tell somebody is, from what that guy said on that podcast, I totally agree with that. I didn't think of it that way. You need to build your team and then increase the volume. And that's what we do with my team. I got my team together and then I go after additional volume after that, because if I try to do the volume first and then we fail on it, nobody will use us. Did I answer that question?
Really great advice, Ed. really great advice. I have numerous times I have been the savior for people who have put themselves in positions that they couldn't, they bet on jobs and things that they just couldn't fulfill. And so the advice that I really want to highlight what you just said. Find the people and support first, and then go for the volume, not the other way around.
It's too hard to catch up. It's too hard to catch up. And then you're going to
literally
lose
putting
that.
themselves out of business.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And a lot of companies were like, I don't want, one example, there's a company just laying off 2,000 people. And one other company close to them is like, why, you just made $5 billion last year. Why don't you keep them on? And because this whole thing that we're going through is, October, November, we're going to see a totally different thing. Anyway, we'll move on. But basically it's like, for me, it's keep the people on staff, and they're going, don't worry. Give us 60 days, 30, it's going to change. This whole, what we've been through, no one's been through that. It's close to 1970s, but it's nowhere close to the 1970s with all the other stuff that we're having going on right now. So
right on. I really want to highlight what you said. And I want the listeners, and if you're watching and you're listening, you're saying to yourself, I'm not sure that I get that, or something. Like through the whole pandemic, most of the companies that I worked with were hiring, not letting people go. That's what people thought. It was like, oh my God, I need to go back and let people go. But the people who did that ended up stagnating. The people who actually bought into it and built through it were super strong, even more strong now today. So
yeah, and we still have 11 million jobs out there. That's just staggering, the amount of jobs that are available. And in my industry, when I have somebody, I'm qualifying them and saying, okay, you don't make enough, I'm like, go get a different job. And they're like, what? I'm like, go get a better job. Today is the first time in history. I mean, you got, In-N-Out, right? Burgers.
Yeah.
I was over dropping my wife off at the airport a couple weeks ago. Or was it last week? I can't remember. They all blend together. And I went through there, don't tell her. And it was $19 an hour to start, up to $24 an hour to work there. That's for fast food. That's just how crazy it is. And yeah.
It's a very interesting topic. This is the first time I've ever experienced this in my lifetime, where if you want to work, if you want a job, you can find a job pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. And you don't have to be fully qualified for it now. They'll train you. Right. It's complete opposite, where we don't have enough, just like we don't have enough houses, we don't have enough people for all the jobs that are available. Right. So what are you going to do? Go get a better job, make more money.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I mean, the truth is, I imagine you would share this too. I mean, regardless, unless it's a professional position like a doctor or a lawyer or something, even the people that go through school and come out with their degrees, whether it's a master's degree or it's a 4-year degree, the company's still going to have to train you anyhow.
Right.
So
yeah. I mean, even doctors get trained, that's why they're residents.
Right on.
Right.
On. I love it. I'm going to ask you this question, Ed.
No.
And then we're going to get to some real business wisdom, like pain points and things like that.
Okay. Whatever it is.
What other successful business owners like yourself, Ed, should be on the Unlimited Wisdom podcast?
Well, I don't know if he's so much a successful business owner yet. It's a side gig working to be full-time, but Brian 𝐏𝐞𝐬𝐳, he's Subtle Skills. Check him out, subtleskills.com. Basically, I said the word basically, I get in trouble because I use that a lot. It's a drinking game we can do now. He has learned facial features, right? And it's amazing what he can find out about you by talking to you about your eyebrows, your brow ridge, your nose, or different things, your upper lip, certain things. And he'll tell you stuff and you're like, holy cow, you are correct. We pretty much see each other at different speakeasies of Steve Sims and different things. And we'll go to a bar and I'm like, go talk to that person. Right. But in order to get to that person, he talks to all the other people and do it for them before he can get there. And it's just amazing what he can find out about you. And people are shocked to a point where somebody like certain people, he's had them, he doesn't mean to, but as he explains to them how they feel about certain things and this, and they start to cry, usually women. But yeah, because
Oh, I still look forward to that.
what I mean by that is because, nobody sees them, right? This is the thing, is they do all this stuff and all they want is a thank you, and nobody's giving it to them. And he knows that by the facial features and certain things. That's the type of person there is. So it allows you to communicate better with anybody. And that's what's so important these days, because we do not know how to communicate anymore.
Now
Right.
that's a deep topic, and one that's really important as well.
Well, it's really not that deep. It's just all the new people these days in the 20s, they're so used to their phones and looking at them. The city here has entrepreneurs come in for when they're interviewing new people coming on to the city to make sure that, everybody's there. And I've been in many interviews where they don't even look you in the eye when you ask them a question. And that's so important.
So true. I say it all the time. Walking down the street, taking a walk. I mean, I grew up in a pretty friendly city. We knew all our neighbors. We spoke to each other. We looked each other in the eye. We say hello. And like all that is pretty much gone away. So even just walking through the grocery store, people don't even, you look at somebody and they're like, what does that person want?
Well, the other thing is, how do you know how, around what's going on around you, right? If you're not looking around you, because you never know in this world how crazy everybody is these days, that you need to, situational awareness.
Right on. I think some of that, I don't know, I'd be interested in your thoughts. Do you think people like me and you and the other listeners who went through the military, do you think the military helped with that kind of situational awareness?
I was in the Navy. I tell people it's like I was on MASH. All right.
He dogged his own branch. Did you hear that?
What I mean by that is we didn't go. So my son's in the Army. He's airborne. He's a medic. They shot everything. I didn't shoot anything in the Navy, right? When I went through boot camp, I was on the others. There was none of that. We didn't go through that kind of training in the boot camp I went through. And so when you say, it wasn't that training. I think I learned it from going to school and reading up on other things, understanding, being aware. Plus, I have a concealed weapons permit in California, which is unheard of. But in our county, our sheriff is really adamant about everybody having it to protect the county, just in case. And not that we think they were going to be, attacked. It's just because there's only so many sheriffs. He wants other people to be there in case, you need, it takes a while to get to the certain locations. And by the time that happens, he doesn't want to find a person dead because they weren't able to protect themselves. So I think I'm going through all this.
Fireman's training and tear gas and all that kind of stuff.
I did tear gas. I did the tear gas. Yeah. But that was like fireman. There was, but did you shoot anything when you were in through boot camp?
I did, but that's a conversation for another day.
Well, I think it also has to deal with, I'm a medic, right?
Not in boot camp. I did it.
Yeah. Well, later on, of course I did, but that was because I was with the Marine Corps, right? I got, I was stationed at Camp Pendleton. And so I'd spend time with the Marines while I was there and go through different FMS training and certain things like that. And yes, you shot a pistol and different things, but it was not anywhere close to what people went through now who's been going through things. So, but I just think it's important to know your surroundings. You have no idea what can happen.
Yeah. Agreed. With awareness is so important. Let's get to some wisdom, Ed. I want to hear.
I thought I was given a ton of wisdom up to this point.
Wisdom. You have been, but I want to hear some deep wisdom about what kind of wisdom you would share with other business owners specifically. What would you share from your perspective?
I think the biggest thing that a lot of people don't look at is what I've been doing. When I first got into my industry, I was a salesperson, and back then we didn't have the technology we have now. And so we would send a package out to a client, and then they would send it back 45 to 50% of the time. Well, I was really important going, okay, why aren't they sending them back? And I myself, I work hard. I want to get it back, and I want to get paid for working hard. And so I went through the process. I would contact each one of them that didn't send it back and ask them what was the reason why. And a lot of them had to do with, which we call pain points, right, in the transaction. Why? Because customer acquisition is the most expensive thing you're going to of your business. And I think that's the biggest problem people don't understand, is getting that client, that customer, whoever, is so expensive. You want to make sure you keep them, because the longer you keep them, the more successful your business will be and the more referrals you get. So I found out some of the pain points that these people were having with documents and certain things. And so I went through all these different underwriting manuals to see if there's anything I could do differently. And so after about 6 months of working on it, I went from a 50% up to an 89% return ratio, which is unheard of in our industry at the time. And so fast forward, I've done that now for my business for the last 20 some years. And we can take somebody with a purchase, we can close a purchase in 9 days and a refinance in 12 by doing the things that we do now. And it's just going to your clients and finding out where the pain points are and acquisitioning that client when you're trying to get them. And even when you have them, go back to them and say, see what you can do differently. Is that a good thing?
I love it. But there's no right or wrong, and there's good and no good and bad. It's just effective and ineffective. But I love what you're saying, because you're delivering it in a different way. But really what you're talking about is market research, right? But not only market research, you're also sharing customer service. I mean, we're in a people business, right? And I think people forget this, where it doesn't matter what product you offer, you're in the people business, right? So you're going to the people and literally polling them, asking questions. Why didn't you do that? Well, what could have been better? What might have changed for you? Those kinds of questions. I'm sure you have a set criteria, right?
Well, yeah, and each one's different. I mean, sometimes you were asking them why they didn't, or even, okay, how could we make the process better for you, right? They went through the process and they were like, well, if you could get me, even agents we deal with, they find out, well, I want, the one thing about you guys is you over communicate with us, right? And that's huge, because a lot of people like me in my industry, loan officers, whatever, they don't communicate with people well. And you would think, really, that's the most important thing. You want to tell people where you're at, or be honest with them. I'm direct. And that's what that is what I learned from the Navy, is being direct, because a lot of I can't be direct anymore. I had to change. No, I have to be direct in my industry. This is the way it is. There's nothing I can do about it. All right, here's what our issue is. This is how we can get around it, not hide from people and get it done. But what you're talking about before about market research, yes, that is that. But there's also, what can I do to make sure my client is happy all the way through, so they refer people to me, right? And that's the most important thing, because I learned this when I was going through business school. Customers aren't always right, but they're all we got.
It's a powerful statement right there.
Right. I thank my professor for saying that.
I mean, the bread and butter, right? Without the customers, you don't have a business.
No, I mean, until AI buy, and you need the customer. We need our people. We need who you are. And all I'm trying to tell people is, do what I've done, which is go through your process and see what's in the way. But the one thing you have to remember is, besides your clients, because your employees, right? If you have them, if you increase the amount of touch points and you get your clients to come in and go through the process, and now you're doing more volume, what other pain points have you created for your company or your employees? You need to go through that process. Or, I mean, technology has helped me drastically in our industry, but you have to be careful implementing every piece of technology. We have one right now that we don't have to get a piece of anything from our clients, but they have to give us their password to log into their accounts and get certain documents, certain things, which that just created a different pain point, because if you're my age or younger, certain age, there's like, no way in hell I'm giving you my password, because that's too intrusive. And they were like, okay, the younger people will do it. I get more pushback by younger people than anybody else. So be careful. Certain things that you want to implement to make it easier could actually cause more problems.
You bring up you've dropped some really powerful points here, and we've gone through them really fast, but there's a lot of depth in what you're sharing. I mean, when we talk about systems, going old school. So you've talked about some old school things. Going old school, I mean, one of the easiest ways to do that is just take all the pain points or all the inflection points or all your processes and just lay them out with sticky pads on a big wall. Right.
I forget what they call that. They call that a whole system. I can't remember that system they call that, but there's a system. My wife does in nursing. So
yeah, find out where the bottlenecks are, the pain points are, and then work through them. But what you're saying here now, so that's one of the brilliant points that you actually brought up, is like, look, figure out what your customers are telling you. So lay out what you have and then go to your customers and ask them, what prevented you from doing this, or how can we serve you better, and these kinds of questions. Everybody knows what questions to ask. They're not secret. There's no secret to those questions. You'll figure them out once you lay it all out. But the other thing you're sharing, though, I think is brilliant, is really just, it's really just being present with your customer. I mean, it really is being present, isn't it?
Yes, it's present, but it's also, so we're prior military, when SOP, right? Standard operating procedures. So you need those in place. And I think a lot of businesses do not even think about having that in place. I'm not talking a business plan. I'm not talking about a certain thing, but if that person isn't here today, who else can come right there, read the thing and move on? And that's how the military is. You're a body and that's it. You could be gone tomorrow. And we got some other body to come in there. They can need to read this, be able to do it and move on. And that's what I think a lot of businesses don't have, unless they have somebody prior military in their business.
I'll share this with you. It's the first time I've said this publicly, but I teach it to my clients and stuff. But did you ever hear about TPI in the military? TPI, two-person integrity. Ever hear that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So I was in a highly classified field, but that's what they use, TPI. And what you're saying, so that's the terminology. Where I thought maybe you knew that. And that's the terminology to describe what you're saying. There should be at least two people for every position that can do, like cross training, they call it, corporate, right?
Right. Yeah, that's
two people.
I've been out so long, I've tried to forget all those different things.
Yeah.
So
and
cross training is what I know now.
For it.
Well, that's because of the Helping the Brave podcast. It's been brought up a lot with a lot of vets who started businesses. They said the first thing I did was created a SOP, and then I noticed the difference with, as we call them, so when you're in the civilian world, it ain't there, right?
I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions, and then we're gonna drop how people can get in touch with you, because I know they want to ask you if you need 20% down to buy a house.
Or they can ask me whatever. They can find out all my different podcasts, radio show, everything else by just going to edparcaut.com.
I know you're gonna get bombarded with questions. But even though you share that all the time, so people are still gonna ask you that question, right?
And that's okay. It's a starting point. So.
Let's talk about teamwork for a moment, because you touched on it really briefly, but that's, at least from my experience and what a lot of the guests are sharing, is like building a team is hard stuff. I mean, it's not easy to build a team. It's one of the most challenging things that business owners deal with, no matter what stage of business you're on, startup or you're seasoned. It seems to be a challenge. What are your thoughts on how to build an effective team? Just generally speaking, anything come to mind, Ed?
Well, I mean, it's so easy to do it now. What I mean by that is, say that you need one employee right now, but you can't afford them because you just started out, or you're building whatever. There's so many fractional CFOs, fractional, bookkeepers, there's so many different ones besides the other things like not personal. What's the other thing called? That's not fraction, huh? VAs, virtual assistants. Right. So there's a bunch. Yeah. So there's companies who have virtual employees. They're not the ones from India or Philippines. Not that there's anything wrong with, I'm just saying that, but they've taken certain time, like, okay, you need a bookkeeper for 5 hours. We have this person over here. You need this for 5 hours. We have this person over here. So you are hiring what you need for your whole company with that one employee that you would have, that you would normally bring in, say, I need you to do bookkeeping, this, and this, and this, which they can't do. But now there's even a sales part of that you can hire the same thing with sales. So it's so much easier these days to be able to figure out where you are horrible at and hire that right away with a fractional part.
So powerful. So powerful. I'm glad I could talk about this until I'm blue in the face, but it will only do so good. I'm glad you brought it up, because you come from a different perspective. And take that whole 40-hour chunk, and if you know your systems and processes, you said it, SOPs. If you know your SOPs and you know your systems and processes, and you just say, look, I need this, I need a chunk for customer service, 6 hours, 12 hours a week, or whatever it is.
Right.
And hire fractionally. It's brilliant, Ed. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I've learned about this through my podcasting, right? You get to talk to people you wouldn't normally talk to. And I talked to a couple of different virtual assistant companies, or they don't really call them that now. They're more employees. And then I talked to a fractional CFO. I've talked to a fractional, and I was like, wow, I had no idea this was even out here until I started doing my podcast and get to know all these different people.
Right on. And now you've talked to a fractional COO as well.
There you go.
That's great. And
Because that's important because most people won't hire a COO.
it's true. It's too expensive. It's an expense that most people won't
You
pay
don't
for,
have
especially
to
now.
pay, right? But you can do a fractional and then pay because you don't need them all the time. You need to set, how long do you need a fractional CFO? I mean, OO, not a CFO.
So this isn't supposed to be about me, and this is supposed to be.
Well, you brought
But
it. This isn't
answer your
about
question.
you. This is about the question of. So I'm saying about fractional.
Yeah. So
we
I'm
were
gonna
saying
be
about how
candid.
much you need for these other people. A COO fractional. What do you need? Maybe 10
5 to
hours a
10 hours a
month.
week. What's
Huh?
interesting, I'm happy to answer your question. What's interesting is, as opposed to the way things used to be done, someone with great experience, a COO ought to be an integrator. And so for every visionary, there's 4 integrators. So there are not too many, there's not too many of us integrators in the world. So if you're an integrator and you're listening or you're watching, you've got a great skill that is in high demand. And so for fractional COO, if you've got those kinds of skills and you have that experience, you can typically come in and what used to be done in 40 hours a week, you can do in 5 to 10 hours. And so you do it fractionally. And then they don't have to pay the employee, but all that stuff. It's so much less expensive and you get greater value. Fractionals,
Right.
That's why fractionals are powerful.
Yeah.
Whether
Plus
it be
you can hire
graphic design or COO, it's powerful stuff. Sorry, Ed, please continue.
No, you're good. Because the reason I'm asking is because you could have a COO, a CFO, and all these different things fractional. And then when someone asks you, do you have a CFO? Do you have a CFO? Yeah, I do. Right. It doesn't matter how long they work for you, that you have all that. Because if you set up your company right the first time, you don't have issues down the road. Did you trademark your name? Huh? Right. I mean, did you check to see if you could? Huh? What are you talking about? I have another, I've had LLC attorneys on my podcast, and it's like things you don't even think about. They're like, do this, this, and this. So you could have the same thing. You could have a fractional attorney for you that do, there's so many things you can do with this that allows you to spend the same amount of money for multiple people that you need for your company.
Right on. You're brilliant.
And by the way, it's information street back and forth. So if I ask you a question, you still have to answer it. Sorry. It's not just about me. Because I don't do this stuff just about me. I do this stuff to educate people and get that information out there. And the reason I do what I do is because I like helping people. It's so important to help people because a lot of people don't want to help people. So I want to.
I absolutely love that. And so anytime I get someone who's done podcasting or does radio shows, I get that sense from them right away. And you represent that. I mean, you walk the talk. And so I love that. I can tell right away.
Yeah. Well,
My
I'm just
goal
glad
is
I haven't had to take
showcase you though, Ed.
Yeah, I know, but we have. But what I like is not taking over the person's podcast, because that was the problem of having somebody on your show that's a podcaster or a radio show. Sometimes they're like, you get on some of them and they have no idea what they're doing, and you're trying to help them through the process, right, as they interview you. And make sure if you're going on a podcast, they've had at least 25 episodes.
Right on. Been there. I think we talked about that before we came on.
So, no, the reason I say that is because people don't realize usually right around there is when they cancel before then, right? They stop doing it because it's a lot of work. It's not easy.
Indeed it is. I think people I talk to a lot of people, I imagine you do too. They're asking me like, hey, I want to start a podcast. I'm like, okay, go ahead. What are your costs? How much time are you willing to invest in it? Like, are you sure you want to have a podcast or two?
Because you got to do the podcast, then you got to get it edited, then you got to get it hosted, then that's not even counting the equipment you need to do. And that's why I created another LLC. It's called Big Hangry Media, and basically it handles all my podcasting and all the costs for all that stuff. And now that I've set up 2 big studios in my town of Modesto, it's like, okay, let's tell everybody if they want to do a podcast, they just come in here, they can record it, we'll edit it, we'll do this, we'll do that, and you can get out of here. Right. It's just so much easier. So
nice. Yeah. What I found is a lot of people overlook how are you going to find the guests, the outreach, like
staying on top of them. Oh, you can get a fractional person to handle that too. So
indeed. I'm glad you brought it up.
Right.
So this is great. Look, what I'd really like to know, and because I know you can drop the facts and the details and all that, and we could just go for hours and hours. And this has been great because one of the biggest things that I really enjoy is like people reach out. You touched it, and people reach out to people based on relationship, based on trust, like and know, or whatever order you feel deemed necessary to put those in. I think it's all mixed up half the time, but because they've gotten to know you. So I asked a question of all the guests, is what's the most important vacation you've ever had? And the reason why I do that is, well, because I like to travel, number one, but number two is because I'm looking for the secret spots. But it's because it's not all about business, right? So we work to live, not live to work. And so that allows the listeners and people watching to get to know you a little bit better. Determine if they really do want to reach out to you, which everybody listening, watching at this point definitely wants to reach out to Ed. So we'll get to that in a minute. But what's the most fun vacation you ever had? Tell us something fun.
Well, all right. So I'm going to do two of them. All right. So with the kids, we did a cruise, and they were young at the time, and they were so happy they could go do all this stuff all day long on the ship. And then when we went into port, we could do things as a family. That was probably the best family vacation that we ever did. For me and my wife, it would be, we walked the 𝐘𝐚𝐢𝐳 𝐸 twice. We did it from the French route, and we did it from the Portugal route a couple years later. So
that's on my list. You happen to down some of those on it. And I was over there.
Yeah. I mean, so we did the first route. I don't know if you just watch the movie The Way, you'll understand what we're talking about. Yeah. But the first route, we started in Astorga the first time because, we work. So we don't have 30 to 40 days to do the whole thing. So we did 3 weeks. And so we started in Astorga and did it. And the first day out, we hit a blizzard, which is unheard of. And and right now on my Facebook feed, it's showing me every day again, because it was 4 years ago that we did the first trip. So
nice. So you were like, yeah, we're out of here. Forget that. We'll come back.
No, the one thing about the 𝐘𝐚𝐢𝐳 Santiago is they say when you need something, the way will provide it, which I was like, that's so stupid. Right. Well, guess what? We're in a blizzard, right? So we take off and we're leaving out, and all of a sudden it's raining, and then we hit a blizzard. I mean, it's really like coming down hard. And I have my walking sticks in my backpack covered up underneath the rain cover because I didn't need them at the time, but it's getting muddier and slippery. I'm like, I really need my walking sticks, but I don't want to take my backpack off to get them. And I look over on this fence, and there's a walking stick leaning up against the fence. Nice. So I grabbed that walking stick and took it the whole trip and actually brought it home. So
good stuff. You're reminding me of lots of stories from over there. Where you weren't stationed over there then?
No, I joined the Navy to see the world, and I got to see San Diego.
I'm so sorry.
Actually, I had a great time. I had a great time down there. It was like so I was stationed at Camp Pendleton most of my time except for Corps School and the boot camp. Everything else was at Camp Pendleton. And then I was stationed at in Texas at San Antonio, the fort, whatever that state, there for my specialty school, which was physical therapy. And then went back to Camp Pendleton to finish that up. So I'm also one of the in
the Great Lakes or in Orlando.
No, it was when RTC was still here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was one of the last classes through there, and that's how long ago it was. Yeah,
that's great stuff. I love this conversation. This is great.
So I went there, and then I went to Camp Pendleton, and instead of working the wards after going through, being a corpsman, they were like, "Anybody know computers?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And so they sent me down to medical mobilization and planning, and I had a high, top secret clearance. We dealt with all the readiness teams and all that stuff. And then 18 months later, they were like, "Okay, it's time for you to be shipped to you're either going to a ship or a specialty school. What's your choice?" I go, "Well, what specialty school is not on a ship?" And they said physical therapy, and I said, "That's what I want to do." So I went to physical therapy.
That's so funny. I love these stories. People join the Navy, but they don't actually want to be on a ship or on a sub or any of those things.
Well, that's I tell people I have no idea which to salute first when you're walking up the thing. I have no idea to ask permissions to come aboard. I've never done it. So
it's so funny. I love it. Thanks for sharing. Look, I want to compliment you, number one, for just your honesty and just who you are and just how you show up. Ed, I really appreciate it. You're just honest and authentic. You're a great person and you're sharing from the heart, which is great. Entrepreneurs like that are fantastic and stand apart, but not just entrepreneurs, people, just people. And so I appreciate that about you. And thank you. I want to ask this one question because you've been so humble. I know you got some really exciting stuff going on. You got multiple shows. What kind of initiatives are you working on? So when somebody listens and watches this and they're like, this guy's really interesting, but they're not exactly sure what to reach out to you about, except for, do I need 20% for to put down a house? A little humor there.
Right. So, all right. So my more initiatives, that's too big a word for me.
What kind of stuff are you working on in business, Ed?
All right. So the mortgage industry, right? That's what I do. That's where I spend most of my day. And the reason I created Inner Edison podcast, Our Greatest Accomplishments Come from Our Greatest Defeats, is because I wanted to explain that making mistakes is okay. Because Steve Sims, who came to me and he said, Ed, you have a problem making mistakes. And I don't know if you can cuss on here. I said, you're full of shit, because I cussed him. Okay. All right. You don't have to worry about it getting banned. All right. I'm on radio sometimes, so I have to be careful. So he's like, you have a problem with making mistakes. I go, no, I don't. He goes, dude, you're military and medical military. If you made a mistake, someone died. I'm like, okay, I can see that. Because not only did I, when I was at Camp Pendleton, I worked physical therapy, and I was an EMT also, but I taught at the EMT school, and I taught all that kind of major stuff, which I was in. And a lot of people go, why'd you give that up to? It's like, I hated patient care. I really did. I wanted to go into business, which I didn't know when I joined. So he's like, you should start a podcast and kind of have that and go through the process of people, failures. And so my wife came up with the name Inner Edison. A lot of people love it. I liked it. And so we went forward. So that's on that show. It's about entrepreneurs who's been through the process and what they learn. And then, I've had people who had an Etsy store for 6 months, and during the great, what we just went through, bear with me here, I'm losing my train of thought.
Pandemic. The pandemic.
Thank you. And how she dealt with certain things of getting certain types of material, and she learned how to make purses out of pool liners. Right. So it's just how people deal with certain situations and how they come out the other side. To Brian Smith, like we talked about before. And then we also had Rob Angel, who did Pictionary, and on his podcast, which I'm different than most people, is we talked about how he picked his business partners. Because I think the biggest thing in business and also in life is picking the right partner, whether it's in business or your personal life. And we have a lot of issues. And so we stayed on that the whole podcast, which is unusual than what other people do. So I focus on what I want to know, which seems to be what most people want to know, because I'm told that I ask the right questions that most people are going to ask, and have a great conversation, kind of like we did here. So
I love it.
The other thing I'm working on is I like helping vets, because we're vets and it's important to help vets. And it's no other time in history are we able to still connect, where when I got out, there was not this. You have phone, right? Or a cell phone, right? We didn't have this internet to connect, or the way we do this live stream and that kind of things. And so that's huge for me, helping vets, because we're 17% of the population and we need to be taken care of, because once you get out of the military doesn't care anymore, nor is it their job to care anymore. But I got helped by an older vet who said, didn't you know about in California, there's Cal Vet, where you can send your kids to school for free if you're at least 10% disabled or greater. I had no idea of that. You just have to pay for their books and room and board, and the military will pick up the other part, the veteran. So
I love that you're doing that. I really want to highlight and showcase that. So not only your character and your person and who you are and authenticity and all those buzzwords, which I mean truly from the heart, but that VA stuff, that really speaks to me, because when I got out, there was nothing. There was no cell phone. There were no computers. There was no, there was computers. Classified words at the time. And
there were 286s and 386s at the time. Most people have no idea what I'm talking about.
And the word PTSD was not, nobody even knew what that was. That was way before that. So
no, or you didn't want to be classified that way because you would not get a job. And that's the other thing about disability. So if anybody wants to find out, it's called helpingthebrave.com, YouTube, whatever. Once we do the lives, it's on YouTube. It's also a podcast everywhere. But when, most people dealt with when they're getting out and they're getting a 10% disability or greater, right? most people didn't want it because they're worried they couldn't go in the sheriff's or the police department because they're like, it's going to affect my rating. It doesn't at all. PTSD will until you're cured from it, meaning that you went through all the process and dealt with it and went on the other side. Then you can get into those types of positions. So
I love that. Honorable, very noble mission. Ed, thanks for your time. Thanks for being here. I know you took a chunk out of your day to be here, so I really want to highlight and showcase that. Thanks, just to serve people. That's what you came on here for, and I really appreciate that. So hopefully we highlighted and showcased you. When somebody listens to this, watches this, and they're like, Ed, I gotta reach out to Ed. What's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
Well, if they're watching the video, they can look where my name is. It says it's @parcaut.com. That's @EDPARCAUT.com. And basically you can find everything about me there. Everything's on there, even the mortgage stuff I do under services, but it really highlights the radio show, the podcast, who I am, and that kind of stuff. I'm still working on it because it's not perfect, but we'll get there someday.
Perfect doesn't exist. Perfect's the enemy of done, isn't it?
I don't know. And then the other thing, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is also Ed Parcaut. So I'm everywhere social under Ed Parcaut. Learned a long time ago to go one name. I'm also lucky in the United States, or unlucky. There's only about 9 Parcauts left. And in overseas, they're with an L, or they're done a different way. So
easy to find. I encourage you to check out his website. He's got some good videos and some great information on there. And check out his
YouTube's
YouTube.
even better. YouTube's even better. It breaks down every question people have regarding mortgages, reverse mortgages. Do I need 20%? Do I need this? Do I need that? I bet, because I have a bucket where I pull questions out that people ask on Google, and I put on TikTok everywhere, and I also put them as shorts on YouTube. So it's shocking how much, because you asked, you hated social media, but I've had more people reach out to me through my YouTube channel in the last month than I've ever had creating it. Because if you look back 8 months ago, a year ago, I wasn't anywhere like I am now. So it doesn't matter when you start it, just to start it.
I do have a love-hate relationship with it because a lot of people misunderstand it, but the way you're using it, I think, is brilliant. So you're answering all the frequently asked questions on it all over social, and that you're just looping people into the system, which is brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think you're brilliant, my friend. So I want to thank you for your time.
I'm just doing what I'm told to do. That's how brilliant I am.
I don't buy that for a minute. Nice try, Ed. I really appreciate you. Thanks for being on.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I'll leave you with this. There's unity in community. Appreciate you.
This is Brad A. Milford with the Unlimited Business Wisdom Podcast, where leaders, seasoned entrepreneurs, and business owners share their wisdom. If you're looking for more on leadership, sales, marketing, or operations to drive team development, higher quality, and high-level sustainable profits, we encourage you to join the Built for Brilliance community on Facebook, or reach out to us about one of our mastermind groups, coaching or consulting, or even fractional COO services. You can reach us at buildbrilliance.net/contact. We thank you for listening, for sharing the show, and appreciate your rating and reviews, as this makes more shows possible. Thanks for joining us.